Welcome, traveler, back to the archives. We've been expecting you. Darth Sidious, the Dark Lord of the Sith, is known to be the most pure evil being, the devil incarnate of Star Wars. His sinister behavior and insidious plots have placed him among the most powerful and most accomplished beings in the entire galaxy, as well as one of the most depraved Sith. But what if the tables were turned? What if at the very beginning, Sheev Palpatine was found by the Jedi and indoctrinated into the Jedi Order? This is a question that a handful of people have asked and have even speculated on, and it's one that is quite difficult to answer. With the existence of a Jedi Knight Sheev Palpatine comes the existence of many variables and many more questions to be answered. One of the most popular of these questions is, would he be as powerful? However, we are not actually here to ask these questions, but rather to answer at least one. That being, why Palpatine would have been a terrible Jedi, and more specifically, why he was destined to be a part of the dark side since the very beginning. Our source today comes from the Darth Plagueis novelization from Plagueis himself, where he states that there is reason to believe that in not a single universe, if ever possible, with Palpatine being a Jedi ever turning out to be a good thing. And in fact, Plagueis speculates he may have ended up causing another great schism in the Jedi, so let's go ahead and open up the holocron today, uncovering this fascinating prediction by Plagueis and filling in the blanks with lore ourselves. Let us discover the truth of Palpatine's destiny. The Palpatine bloodline was a family of aristocrats and politicians living the high life of wealth on Naboo. The patriarch of the family was named Kasinga Palpatine, who was heavily involved in the political sphere of their home world, and had a heavy hand in how things played out leading up until the Battle of Naboo in 32 BBY. What's most interesting perhaps about the Palpatine bloodline is Sheev Palpatine is the first in the entire line to ever be Force sensitive, or have been noted to have been Force sensitive. With Sheev being so strong in the Force in fact, that his father Kasinga mentioned how strange of a child he was, even as an infant, noting that he caused odd things to happen around him. Most children don't exactly start showing signs of manifesting the Force until they're around toddlerhood, so Palpatine was showing signs extremely early. Of course, Sheev Palpatine's midichlorian count clocks in at a whopping 20,000. For reference, Yoda's midichlorian count, the highest recorded in the Jedi Order besides Anakin, is 18,000. And it really is a wonder that the Jedi didn't find Palpatine as a young boy, but we can thank Palpatine's father, Kasinga, for that. The Palpatine patriarch notoriously despised the Jedi, thinking them all of a bunch of weirdos. So knowing very little about the Force, but recognizing it within his son, Palpatine's father paid exorbitant amounts of money in order to cover up his son's Force sensitivity, and to make sure that the Jedi stayed far away from his son. The reason for this being is that he couldn't bear the shame that he believed it would bring on his family if his son were discovered to be anything less than normal. So this was why Sheev was never actually found by the Jedi. This, along with his innate ability to cloud his presence in the Force. We know that Sheev growing up basically lived life without any sort of moral compass whatsoever. He learned in an early age that strong got to do whatever they pleased, because anytime he caused trouble, he wouldn't have any consequences since his father would just bribe people to cover it up and keep him out of prison, or worse. There was even a case early on in his life where a young Palpatine killed 2 pedestrians in a speeder accident, getting away with no punishment, and notably, no remorse either, with Palpatine even noting that this was strange, but of course shrugging it off because he did not care of the opinions of lesser, even before he indoctrinated himself as a Sith, a fascinating realization. This was in fact a story that he would share with Plagueis when the two of them became very good friends. In the end, Plagueis would quote perfectly to Sheev what he was. This is what Darth Plagueis said to the boy. And of what possible use do you think a person of your nature would be to the Jedi Order? You are heartless, ambitious, arrogant, insidious, and without shame, nor empathy. All of this points to Palpatine's character to be sure, but many might say that it was simply a product of how he was raised. Perhaps if Palpatine was found as an infant, he could be different. But according to Sheev's father, that may have been a very different case. Kasinga mentions to his son that when he tried to swaddle Sheev as an infant, the boy fought him with strength far too powerful for someone his size. At that point, Kasinga knew something was wrong with the boy, and he had himself tested to make sure that Sheev was actually his legitimate son. He had hated his son for this. Growing up, young Palpatine would look at his father with nothing more than hatred, disdain, and murderous intent, furious that he could not act upon his urges. What's notable is Palpatine's own mother never says something very noteworthy about her son whatsoever. With that said, the idea of someone being practically born as evil is usually a subject of intense debate. The nature versus nurture argument has to play a role in the deliberation about Palpatine's destiny, but perhaps the dark side of the Force did choose him. However, it has actually been pretty much confirmed about Sheev as a person. He is a clinical psychopath. Mental illness is something that is quite often overlooked in the Star Wars galaxy, but it does play a significant part of a person's use in alignment to the Force. The Jedi train their younglings in the same doctrine for all species and kinds, but there are just some that are not destined for the Jedi way. If someone is ambitious, cunning, or passionate, that eventually does show in their Jedi training. Take Dooku for example. Despite the fact that he was left to die in the woods by his father, who too was ashamed of him, he eventually grew up to be a noble and a valiant Jedi, leading with grace and posture. This caused him to be a social outcast among many of his classmates, and I believe Palpatine would have been the same. Unfortunately though, there is one difference between Dooku and Palpatine. Palpatine lacks empathy and compassion entirely. His ambition will always counteract any attempt at peace, and he may always harbor feelings of hatred for his father for throwing him away. Not to mention, his extremely high potential in the Force would manifest in pure arrogance. He would likely form a natural rivalry with Yoda and butt heads with Windu. The strict mandates and rules of the Council would begin to get under his skin, especially when he attained the rank of Knight. Like Qui-Gon and Dooku, the Council would chastise his methods, and soon, like all fallen Jedi before him, Palpatine would become less enthusiastic about the Council, and far more interested in the Sith holocrons hidden below the archive vault. Dooku himself as a young Padawan viewed forbidden Sith knowledge, and if Dooku did it, you can absolutely bet that Palpatine would too, using his charisma to bring a whole host of Jedi with him, and effectively becoming the second coming of Exar Kun. What has always been fascinating about the character of Darth Sidious is he was literally born to be a Sith, something that Darth Plagueis himself recognizes. Darth Plagueis never intended to take upon himself an apprentice, viewing himself as the culmination of Bane's rule of two, but he had never seen a being so perfectly suited for the Sith Order as Palpatine was, and he could not deny its ravenous calls. Perhaps even if Palpatine were a Jedi, Plagueis would seek him out and train him, attempting to manipulate him the same way that Sidious would do to Anakin. Perhaps the only difference in the Plagueis novel is that Plagueis finds him as a Jedi and not as a nobleman's son on the world of Naboo. Perhaps this iteration of Palpatine with Jedi training could become even more powerful. But anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on Darth Plagueis himself predicting what it would be like if Palpatine were a Jedi? Why he is simply not wired to be a Jedi, or even serve those that he deems lesser. And now, I pose the question to you. Do you believe it is possible for someone to be born this way and destined to become a Dark Lord of the Sith? As always, my friends and fellow acolytes, thank you for visiting our archives. May the Force be with you, and have a great day.